to the 6 p.m. Monday, March 12th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting in the Pat Shantz Commission chambers. We'll call to order the meeting and we'll have roll call. Ms. Gwen?
Commissioner Cabela?
Here.
Commissioner Clyott, she called in, so she will not be attending tonight, so she's absent. Chairman Wyckoff? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Commissioner Wyckoff?
Here.
First Vice Chair Belowski?
Here.
Commissioner Rappa?
Here.
Commissioner Hearn?
Here.
Chairman Noble?
Here. And we will move on to the approval of the minutes from January 8th, 2018. Gwen had made some changes. I think everybody got it and had a chance to review it. Any problems with the minutes?
Move for approval.
Second.
Take the vote, please.
Commissioner Clyott? She's absent. Commissioner Rappa?
Yes.
Commissioner Cabela?
Yes.
Commissioner Wyckoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Hearn?
Yes.
First Vice Chair Belowski?
Here.
Chairman Noble?
Yes.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair,
Go ahead.
before we proceed, because we've already got Commissioner Cabela voting on things, we actually need to have her sworn in. Do you
Okay.
do you have the oath?
I do.
Okay.
I haven't been sworn in either.
You haven't been sworn in either? We have two of them that need to be sworn in. And Rappa? Commissioner Rappa? You can do it. Commissioner Rappa.
I was at the last meeting, but I didn't get sworn in.
Okay, so I do one each?
They could do it together.
Commissioners, do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Florida, the Charter, and the Code of Ordinances of the City of Madeira Beach, and that you will faithfully discharge your duties as a member of the Planning Commission for the City of Madeira Beach to the best of your ability in the manner provided by law?
Yes. I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We can proceed.
Okay, so we're on to new business. And looks like first on the new business agenda is A, to amend section 110-93. And this is the intent concerning non-conforming property, structure, and uses to provide changes and expansions to structures with setback encroachments with restrictions based on performance-based measures. And I think the city would go first with their presentation.
Yes, sir. Good evening. The intent here is to resolve a ongoing conflict that we have throughout the city. In the time that I've been here, I've come to understand that probably as many as 80% of all properties, maybe more, within the city of Madeira Beach are non-conforming in one way or another for setbacks or other types of issues. And it looks like over time, well, there have been a number of things that have occurred. For one thing, for many years, the county was doing the permitting, and they would permit development according to building codes, but weren't apparently checking to see whether setbacks were being adhered to at the local level. In addition to that, we have properties here that have been subdivided as far back as the 30s. So properties were developed, houses were built before some of the setbacks by the city were ever even established. So the setbacks were laid over top where houses already had been built. And so the houses were immediately non-conforming to these new setbacks. And so we have a set that's not unusual in terms of especially the side setbacks. They're not unusual in terms of their depth, but they are very standardized as if you were developing a new subdivision. And when you go to try to lay that over existing properties, you're of course going to run into really old properties, you're going to run into some problems. So not only does that create a problem just in general for enforcement, it creates kind of an unmeetable standard. The only way to redevelop or to add on to any of these properties is to bring them into compliance. Now you can add on to them while keeping in the setback entirely, but sometimes it's not a rational extension of the house. And one concern that many of us have is that as insurance costs goes up out here on the beach, it's going to be more and more difficult for people to stay in their homes. And that we need to do what we can, within reason obviously, to allow for some modification of existing houses to make them livable, to allow them to grow a bit with people as opposed to requiring the people to redevelop or just move away. And some of our houses are very small. They were really built as weekend getaways or retirement houses, and now we have, you know, full families living out here. It's become a year-round community. So what we are proposing is that we allow for the expansion of non-conforming houses that have setback problems, not to go any further into the setback than they already are, but along the line that they currently are on, so that they would extend that line along the setback, but they wouldn't go any deeper into it, as long as the neighbors next to them who they are encroaching on had signed off on it. It's similar to what we do with docks. If your dock is closer than 50 feet from your neighbor and the neighbor's okay with that, they can sign off on it and allow the extension of the dock or the construction of the dock. The purpose, as I said, is to allow us to move forward with a little more flexibility dealing with these age-old encroachments. I've proposed this just for the R1, 2, and 3 districts. Those are areas that have the highest setback requirements. I'm not proposing changes in the commercial districts yet. Those should be managed primarily by way of site plan. Also am hoping to require that when these additions are made and people agree to, the neighbors agree to them, that they record that agreement just the same way that we do with other kinds of variances or restrictions on property, so that in the future it's clear what the record was and why the house exists the way that it does, and it doesn't create legal problems and arguments down the way. Now, the language also provides that that there be at least 5 feet of clearance on one side of the house, because we often have problems where people want to do some kind of repair or work or have an emergency at the back of the house, and they're so close to the property line that the only way to get to the back is across their neighbor's property. And of course, their neighbor's not obligated to provide that and may have a fence in the way as well. So you want to make sure that there's always room to do work in the back. The one thing that I didn't put on here that I would like the board to consider and am recommending for an addition is that when a house is built close to the setbacks, they'd be required to put on a guttering system that's substantial enough to carry all of the water from the roof off into an appropriate location, so that it's not draining onto the neighbor's property and creating any kind of a runoff problem, because we already have that all over town with one house creating a puddle in somebody else's yard. We want to avoid that. So that's something that we'd like to work out with them. The purpose in doing this is in putting those performance standards in. You know, you can do this as long as you leave this much space, or you can do it as long as you have the guttering, and as long as everybody's signed off, is that we can make it a process that gets administered on a case-by-case basis, but at staff review, so that we don't have to come back time and time again for a variance. Variances cost a lot of money. The cost of that's going to be going up, and unless there's something peculiar about the land, people can't get a variance for their improvement. Now, this is not unusual. Other places do allow for extensions along an existing encroachment, as long as you don't go any further into it, and as long as there's no kind of a complaint or they haven't been creating a problem already for the neighbors. So it's kind of modeled on things that other cities have done over the years. I know that we have a number of people here who wanted to speak to the issue as well. It's a very common problem for us.
I think we've been dealing with that for quite some time.
Yes, and you know, this is somewhat of a stopgap. Over time, I would like us to go through a complete community-wide planning process where we could talk to the communities and develop standards that actually match the way areas are developed, or where you think the community thinks they'd like them gradually to develop towards. And maybe some of those conflicts would resolve themselves, because there are cases where people come in and they want, for instance, to fill in a spot in the front of their house. Excuse me. I apologize. They want to fill in a spot in the front of their house. You know, often people have an inset entry, and we can't let them do that because the whole house is already encroaching in the front. But when you look down the street, you find that all the houses are also encroaching, so they're the only ones who don't get to do it. And if it had been built that way originally, it would have been fine. So we have a lot of those situations, or people want to add on to the back. Everybody else is closer, you know, or further out than they are. I'm not suggesting that people be able to encroach into the setback for things like on the coast. We have to be careful about maintaining open space and avoiding encouraging people to get too close to the bay. But we also have situations where whole neighborhoods are encroaching into the side setbacks, and the one person who hasn't, or is barely encroaching, isn't allowed to do, you know, complete their line along the back of the house for some reason. So we think that this would make it a little bit easier to deal with the current situation, and something that we can continue to address in the codes as we review the codes over time.
And this would apply to new construction as well as
No.
just addition?
Just
New
addition.
construction,
You're
they-
putting it up new, you know where the setbacks are, and you can adhere to them. I will make a point, however, that we already allow this with redevelopment. Remember, in our code, if you come in with a redevelopment plan, you can put up a new house on the old footprint, even if it's encroaching in all directions, as long as you don't increase it or change the footprint. So we already give credit to new houses to allow them to rebuild on a nonconformity. We just don't allow people to improve their own houses and extend any kind of nonconformity. That may be something that we'll need to clarify and touch up over time as well.
So that not increasing the footprint would then be redefined as the footprint basically from side to side, not as much as front to back. If we're redeveloping a piece of property that you can build in the
You
same
can put it on the same footprint no matter where it's encroaching right now.
Right, but if you wanted to expand that then front to back without encroaching further on the side setbacks, it would be permitted as long as
No.
it didn't encroach further in the back.
Once you
No.
start stepping outside the footprint, you're supposed to go to existing.
Total
And
conformity.
actually, in a lot of cases, it really makes more sense for them to use the existing, the proper setbacks, because they want the house to be bigger and longer instead of wide, because they want to get out closer to the water. And so quite often, it doesn't
Well, but we
really
have some of
serve
these
their
40-foot
purpose.
wide lots.
Right.
You're not going to be able to fit it into the traditional setback,
Right, that is.
and you're
it's-
still going to have a very small house.
Right. We have a lot of 40 50-foot lots. We do 40 and 50-foot lots. The 40-foot lots are pretty difficult to deal with, and some of them are not quite 40 feet. So the setbacks are quite often an issue. In those cases, if it's under 40, we could go for a variance. But again, you're requiring people to go through an extra process to use a lot that was subdivided and permitted as a usable lot by the city. So,
I guess what I'm getting at is we would allow somebody to add on to the back of a house that's already a non-conforming setback situation, side setback.
correct,
To the extent that they're not non-conforming on the back setback.
correct.
But if that house were destroyed or demolished voluntarily, we couldn't expand the back further towards the back. Or could we? I
Correct.
know what I'm getting at.
Yes.
Okay. If we tear down, the
Right.
footprint here, and this is non-conforming, but we still have room to go back here before we hit the rear setback, can we use these as the footprint and go back further?
No, not now. I mean, if you just want to use the no, you can't.
Okay.
Not with the redevelopment process. That's a whole nother section of the code, and we can address.
It seems a little counterproductive, because I think we're trying to get rid of houses that are on the ground. If we want to
Well, that
raise
was-
base flood elevation,
That
you
was an
might want to think about
encouragement.
including that, so that you could actually make the house bigger,
I would
family livable.
suggest, though, if you're going to be developing a piece of property and you knew you were going to expand front or back, that at least one of the sides should leave the 5 feet so that you can get around the back, because sometimes those encroachments are on both sides of the house, and allowing them to build new there just really doesn't make any sense. It's for safety reasons.
Understood.
And this doesn't affect the FEMA 50% rule. They would only
No,
be able to
this-
do 50% of
Correct.
the square footage?
That's right.
Or is it 50% of the value?
No, it's 50% of the value.
Of the value. Square footage has nothing to do with it?
That's
With the
right.
FEMA, okay.
Correct. Correct. And there isn't anything we're going to do, if anything, to make that more permissive. If anything, it would be made stricter over time because it affects the entire community's insurance rate.
Any other questions?
Does this include any other structures on the property, or just the main?
Just the
housing?
main structure. It doesn't alter. If accessory structures are allowed to go into the setback to some degree, we like to keep them 2.5 feet back. They are not allowed to encroach into the water setback, for the backyard setback for property on the water, but otherwise they're allowed to go into setbacks on the side. In yards without water, they can go all the way back to the back fence.
So Linda, if someone wants to raise their house, they can raise it too, as long as it's within the setback?
Yes.
So-
Yes, if you want to raise your house, you would be able to, you're using the same house, so you could put it on the same footprint it's on right now, just higher.
My other question for clarification is, in red, everything that is in red, is this all new that you've added, or what?
Right. All of the underlined text is proposed new text, and I think that it gave me different colors when I went back in the second time. And I kept trying to fix it, but it actually looks different up there than it does on my screen, so. Yeah,
But everything that in our package that you've given us in red is things that
new.
have been added?
Yes. It's proposed to be added.
Proposed
That's
to be
what you're
added.
considering,
Yes,
yes.
I guess, yeah, that we're considering this evening.
Right. And I would like to propose that you require the guttering and water direction as an add-on to this when it goes to the city commission. If not, I'll propose that when I get there again.
As part of the motion.
Right. I know that there are people here to speak from the.
Do we have anybody from the public that would like to speak? If you come up, please state your address, and I think we're going to put the timer on at 3 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep, I'll set my time.
And we'll have to let you know since the timer is covered.
Right, I have to use my phone.
Hello, my name is Vicki Clark, and I live 3rd Street, East Madeira Beach, and I have about 1,000 square feet home, and I want to add on a back room, a bedroom, about a 12 by 12 and a small bathroom. Right now I have 2 bedrooms that are like 10 by 10, And I'd like to add on because I plan on retiring there and living here, you know, the rest of my life. And that's why I want to build on. But where I want to build on, the house I have now is about 3 feet from the fence on the side. And it needs to be 5 feet if I build on. So the addition that I build on would be awkward. In the back, it would be 2 feet over from what is already there. And I'm going to put a new roof on. So when I put the new roof on, that will make the whole roof line awkward also. And the purpose to, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think you can.
Go one at a time.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I want my house to look nice and just be a little bit larger and comfortable. And but the part about where the neighbor has to agree, I don't like that part because sometimes you have neighbors that are difficult, and I don't think people that should be penalized about, you know, what you can build and can't build because of the kind of neighbor you have. So I think the rule should go for what it is, not whether your neighbor agrees or not, because some people have very difficult neighbors. And so I don't like that part of the rule. Anyway.
Hi, my name is Dan Lombardo. I'm the contractor, would-be contractor on this job, and I just want to pass this around. These are the plans, and this is the issue she's having. It's the existing footprint, and I'll just go ahead and go one by one. And as you can see, the gray area is the proposed addition. It's a small addition. The bedroom now is this area here, and I'll explain it to each one of you, but she has no way of making this small addition to her house without restructuring the whole back, involving an entire kitchen remodel because of this exit door here. So it makes it very difficult for her to have just a small addition, which is, you know, it's 13 and a half feet by less than 13 feet. Sorry about that. Right now, she has a one-bedroom, one-bath house. And she has plenty of property in the back, just can't come straight back for a small addition. So that's all she's asking to do. As you can see, the doorway here to the outside would be affected if we jog it over, which she was fine doing. But the problem is we'd close that off. We'd have to redo her whole kitchen, and she wouldn't be able to do it with the FEMA rule. So it makes it impossible for her to create this small addition because of that doorway in the kitchen. That's it. Sure.
Okay. Does the neighbor on the other side, who she would be encroaching, have 5 feet on the other side of his house to allow for emergency access? And does your house have 5 feet on the other side to allow for access? What is the on the other side of your house? You see what I'm saying? So both houses would have 5 feet to enable.
The other side of my house, I actually parked my car over there. It's pretty large. How big? 14 feet. It's pretty big. But, you know, most of my house right now, it's got 3 feet on the side where I've got my propane heater, my air conditioner. I mean, I've got enough area over there. So it would just be that small room out that would be.
And I'd like to encourage the board to think past this one project. We're talking about the entire city here, and you have no authority over
Right.
this project because it's in review with me. But and what is available on the neighbor's property really shouldn't have any effect on the decision either, because the neighbor can't be held responsible for access to a person's property. So it would need, anything we're doing here would need to involve the individual property standing on its own. With the the purpose in the sign-off, obviously, is that we're proposing waiving an encroachment protection in the code that's there to keep a certain amount of designed space between buildings, and that encroachment has an effect on the neighboring property. So that was the purpose in that.
So are you reviewing that with the homeowner? Are you
And
reviewing
this
that?
has been submitted, but it's not before you as a particular issue. I'm glad that they're speaking to it. They're not asking you for a decision because you have no authority on this particular site. It's a site plan review.
I see.
But while you're there, they wouldn't have to come up in front of us if
Right.
we passed
Correct.
this. You would be able to make the
Well,
decisions over
Right,
that.
it would not
Right.
need any kind of, well, they
Staff
couldn't-
would be able to
see,
decide these
Right.
on
It is a
case
good
by case.
example, because in this case, there's nothing particularly wrong with the piece of property. There's nothing unusual about it, so they have no grounds for variance. And as he was explaining, there is enough room on the other side of the house for an addition, but it would require so much rework on the structure, it would trip the 50% rule.
Right.
And they wouldn't have the opportunity to make the improvement. So it's sometimes
Okay.
difficult.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Anybody else like to speak this evening? Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Tom Dranaski. I'm a general contractor working with the prospective client Sandy Carnes, who is at 343 Boca Ciega Drive. And you want my address as well, or? That's okay. At any rate, we've been working with Sandy since last summer, and we've had numerous meetings with staff. That being from meeting with Cheryl McGrady, Marcy. Frank, we spoke with Patty, and we met with Linda a couple of times. And all those times that we had meetings with staff, we had conversations as to what we were trying to accomplish. And we were looking to build a second story on the front portion of Sandy's home. And it was all favorable. Every time we had asked as to what we needed to accomplish before we actually finished plans and whatever, we got the heads up, and yes, we can do that. At that past fall, Sandy had asked about trying to expand it a little wider than that, which would have infringed on setbacks, and that didn't go as we had hoped. But in view of that, question never came up about the front setbacks, and we turned plans in for the third time back in December, and then it came up the fact that we were non-conforming because the front of the house is closer for the setbacks. So I would encourage this reading as well, because that will eliminate our problem. We discussed going with the existing building lines, and there was a negative response, nothing that was detrimental to us. Therefore, we revised our thinking, and we did what the staff had recommended. And unfortunately, that something cropped up then in the zoning ordinance that Linda was able to resuscitate and no one else had before that. And here we are today, we're in a quandary. So we need your support, hopefully in adopting this ordinance and fast-tracking it, hopefully tonight, as well as maybe encouraging, if you have any authority there, too, encouraging the commission to fast-track it for the upcoming meeting so this doesn't take 2 more months, but we can hopefully accomplish it this coming month. This has gone on a lot longer than anybody anticipated, and we would appreciate your support. If there's anything I can answer, I'd be happy to.
Thank you, sir.
That house is another good example, because what they're proposing is a second story without encroaching into any further into setbacks. They're just going up. And that's considered an increase in the nonconformity by degree, but it's not expanding anything on the ground.
So
And
they're going to leave the existing
footprint.
house and just build a second story.
Correct. And sometimes, especially in the case nowadays of trying to meet ADA accessibility issues, sometimes it's difficult to find the proper place within an existing structure to install stairs and elevators and things like that. And you really need to do it either on one side of the house or the other in order to stay within that 50% again. You have to do the entire project as one, and it has to be complete and CO'd as a complete project. You can't phase it. So when you're doing something that major, too much rework within the house is problematic.
Anybody else like to speak on this? Then any other questions from the planning commission?
I have a question for you. On section C here, additions of a second floor to legal non-conforming structures, is that only applicable to second floor additions where we have to ask the neighbor, to this lady's point? Is it only for a second floor addition, or would it be in the case of any addition whatsoever that would be an add-on on that setback line?
Which section?
Section 3, the first couple
3.
words, additions of a second floor. First sentence of section
Right,
3.
I specified that as a separate section just to make sure it was clear.
Okay, it's only for second floor additions. So in this lady's case, she would not be subject to needing the neighbor's permission?
If it doesn't, correct,
Okay.
as long as it doesn't create any additional extensions.
Okay, anybody else?
Under the nonconforming use, it says if it ceases for any reason for more than a year, the grandfather's status of the nonconforming use will terminate. Isn't a year an awfully long time?
Yes, that's pretty standard. Yeah, if like it usually pertains to businesses. If the business goes out of business and it stays out of business for a year, you can't open it back up. But it does give people enough time to get whatever finances back together and reestablish their use within that year's period. That's pretty standard.
You have to keep in mind there's a difference between a non-conforming use and a non-conforming structure. A non-conforming use would be like a commercial 7-Eleven in the middle of a residentially zoned area. That's a different kind of use. Where a non-conforming structure is a structure that doesn't meet the current setbacks.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else, or can we have someone make a motion on?
I will. I'd like to make a motion as proposed by the city, and would add that there be a guttering system on the encroaching side sufficient to carry away any and all rainwater runoff so as not to affect the nearest neighboring property.
Second.
And can we take a vote?
Commissioner Wyckoff,
Yes.
Commissioner Clyett, Commissioner Rappa,
Yes.
First Vice Chair Belaski,
Yes.
Commissioner Cabela,
Yes.
Commissioner Hearn,
Yes.
Chair Noble.
Yes. Okay, thank you. And moving on, Board of City Commissioners referral. The Board of Commissioners has referred the following documents to the Planning Commission for review. And I woke up thinking it was Groundhog Day. So I'm not really quite sure what they want us to review, but I mean, I've reviewed it and it seems to be what we reviewed last year and before. The city, do you have a presentation to fill us in on what our expectations are?
There we go. I'll attempt to do so. And what I would like to do is just go over briefly the areas in these ordinances that have changed. The history of it is that in order to accommodate and encourage higher levels of commercial development in what was a designated town center area, which is this area on either side of Madeira Way, down 150th to the park, and then including the city hall and all this parkland here, and the yacht club. That in order to encourage creating more dense town center kind of for that, the staff had come to the Planning Commission and then the City Commission requesting changes to actually create new land uses that were a higher density, increase the intensity and the ability to transfer density and intensity from various areas, and then making sure that all those kind of changes were carried through all of the land use policies and the land use map and the special area plan, and then eventually came back with it generated a plan development request for the town center as we know it now. There were some, so what I'm going to do is just, what you've gotten is a referral from the City Commission to review a number of these documents. They did not refer back to you the PD itself. You'll notice in your packet it does include the development agreement, and typically the plan board would not get involved in looking at the agreement. You would have reviewed the PD, but not the agreement. The agreement is the legal document that's a contract between the city and the developer. It's the method you use to implement all of the conditions of the PD, which is a specialized zoning just for a particular project or a particular area. So what I suggest is that I go through the first few ordinances just to briefly tell you the types of changes, draw your attention to the types of changes that are included in those. And then I can answer some.
But these changes have already happened.
Yes, they
Right.
have. All of these
We've already
changes
voted on these changes.
have already been approved.
By the commission, not just
Correct.
us.
The
Okay.
commission has approved them. There is a PD that was also approved. There's a development agreement that has been executed, and there were legal challenges, and all of those have been settled. In addition, following on the settlement of those agreements, there were also covenants recorded for the development, and there was a estoppel issued to prevent people from going back and starting everything over. It's very important that you also recognize that the development agreement specifies that when the development comes back in for site plan review, it will be regulated by whatever land development codes were in place at the time the agreement was executed. So even were you to be, or the city to make changes to the codes and the ordinances right now, it would have no effect on the existing agreement or the development, as long as they do not propose any changes to that planned development agreement. To date, in meetings with the developer, in preparation for the site plan that would come in to begin implementing the development, they have no intention of stepping outside of the exact every detail of the agreement, just to avoid starting the process over. So at this point, I have been given no indication by the developer whatsoever that they have any intention of changing or requesting changes. Yes?
Why are we doing this if no changes are going to be made? What is the purpose of the city commission sending this back for additional review if no changes are going to be made?
There wasn't a great deal of discussion. This was referred back from a workshop setting, and there was no vote taken other than just a referral generally made to the plan board and specifically to review these ordinances. So I believe that it is their intent that you begin reviewing them in anticipation that there might be changes in case any were proposed, because the development is anticipated to come in for review soon. And there's ongoing discussion in the community about whether the ordinances are really all adopted correctly. So actually the staff is recommending that we bring in a well-qualified and recognized land use expert attorney to go over everything with the commission, and at that time perhaps they would allow for the planning commission members to be present for that presentation as well. Just in the event that something were to change, the land development, the site plan will not be coming back to you, because according to the code as it was in place at the time of execution, there is no site plan review. So even if we change that, and I was going to propose that big developments like this do have a public hearing site plan normally, But it would have no effect on this one because of the agreement that's in place.
Yes, after, it would be for future
Correct.
land development projects.
And perhaps they want you to get an idea of what was done here for future development as well, just to know what kind of process was under the thinking.
I know somebody was here for all of this.
I know.
I'm not sure everybody was, but
Not everybody, yes. We have a lot of new
it
members.
sounds familiar.
We have a lot of new members on the plan board, like almost everybody. And so I think that they just want you to be aware of all of the issues.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are the things in red, are those changes
Those were the changes that were made,
already made?
already made. We are proposing no changes whatsoever. This is just the documents as they went to the commission and were approved last time. So these are the changes, the ones in red are the changes that the commission made to these documents and agreed on, yes.
And what year was that? These were modifications to the original?
Right, the special area, this was modification to a 2009 special area plan, and then additional through 2014 amendments to the land use and the LDRs.
Okay.
Says it at the top.
Yeah, that's how this.
Yeah, each one of them is
Yeah,
dated.
so I guess they're just wanting us to stay involved and making sure we read these things so that if they do want changes, then we are on top of it, is all I can
Correct.
gather that they're wanting us to do. So we've reread them, if, we've all looked at them, so.
Right, and because you normally don't review development agreements, I was going to suggest that it would make more sense to you if you were familiar with the PD, which was its basis, and that we could schedule that for another time. I could go over it in detail with you, because if we did all of this tonight, we'd be here all night. It's a lot of material.
Well, we could do that outside of the meeting setting, couldn't we? I mean, we don't have to be in a
Could,
meeting
yes,
for that.
because you would not be
We have
voting.
a
We could have a
workshop or
workshop
something,
and
right.
just,
It would be,
make-
that would be more for a workshop than sitting here.
which would allow you a little freer conversation.
I would very much like to do this. As I read through this, there's a lot that I do not understand. It is very complicated. I think for all of us, I think to go through all of these ordinances, for you to explain exactly what it is,
Okay.
to have a workshop, and as you said, a land use attorney or a land use person to really explain this, because it really is quite complicated.
Yes, it is.
Yes, and you may understand it, but I can say when I tried to read through it and understand it, there's a lot that I would really like to know more about, and I think sitting on the planning commission, I want to.
Well, perhaps if Mr. Brooks is amenable, we could have a workshop and we could at least go through it with you and explain it to you, and then it would help you formulate any questions you had before any experts came in from out of town. I don't know for a fact they're actually going to bring somebody in. Both of us have extensive land use experience, so we could go through this with you.
Because I have many, many questions, yeah.
Yes, I could see that it would go on quite a while.
Yes.
It's a new commission, so,
So basically, we would be reviewing.
microphone, please.
So basically, we'd be reviewing this in case there's an issue going forward. There's no issue currently.
Correct.
Okay.
And there's no new development that you have on your table right now that's going to change this?
No, anything
Okay.
that comes in, I'm pretty positive will look exactly like,
Well, yeah, for
PD.
this, right, for this one that we've already, from last year, that's
Correct.
all behind us. I mean, like,
Yes.
nothing new, a whole new
No.
contractor, a whole new
No.
plan development that they want to rush this through so that we
No.
got all our ducks in a row,
we
okay?
won't- and we won't be rushing anything through.
But, yeah, that's a,
There were some things missing here and there in the last process because there was a lot, they amended a lot at once, and it pushed through a lot all at once, but it was determined by a judge that adequate information went through with the process to allow for decision-making, and so it's with.
and all that's been worked out, so
Yes,
that's
it
all
has.
behind us, yep. The
Yes.
town center is behind us and ready to move forward.
It'll be in our purview for a long time. I'm sure it's going to take quite a bit of time to get up, but as of this point, yeah, the legal documents are set.
Good, all right.
but we can review this,
Yes,
look at it closely, and decide if there are changes that we think that for the future.
yes.
I think that's,
the type of things, because some of these changes actually could apply to areas outside of the town center. And I think that's very much in everybody's mind as well. How are we moving forward? And as I've said to all of you, well, you're new, but I've said to everybody, we really need to go through a community-wide planning process and decide what our codes need to say to get us to the look and the feel that we want in the community, not on a case-by-case basis, but, you know, what do we want the community to look like, as if the whole town were a special area plan. And then people will know what kind of development they can bring in without having to go through a PD and, you know, a lot of legal documents every time somebody builds something.
right, because this looks to me like a lot of high density. I could be wrong. It doesn't really state, as I'm seeing it, how many floors you can build. There's a lot of things that I'm not understanding.
Right. Well, we did hand out a document tonight that is the covenants that went along with the settlement, and that does limit the height. There were height restrictions in here, but it is a whole, most of those are contained in the PD, and that wasn't referred. So we'll go through all that at the same time when we bring this back, if you would like to do that. So we can get with the chair and establish a workshop date. And we'll probably try to poll the board a little bit to make sure that if we do a typical Monday night meeting, would that work for the board?
To have the workshop before the meeting?
No, to have a workshop, what kind of, instead of a,
Oh, instead of, yeah, I mean,
I'm going to have things for you to look at every month.
yeah, April
There's-
9th is our
there's-
next scheduled meeting
Right, but we will have things on your agenda,
for April 9th,
Yes,
okay? So you're
quite a bit.
question like maybe May or when it's slower.
Well, or if you could have an extra meeting night during the month, is what I'm saying.
Oh, okay, an extra meeting.
On a different Monday, yes.
Mr. Chair, if I may, and this may have been discussed when I had to vacate the room, but is it the board's pleasure to have that discussion or conversation with the land use expert that we're looking to bring in specific to the town center development?
They were interested in that, but what I had suggested is for our workshop purposes, that Ralph and I probably have the expertise to at least go through it with them so they can formulate their questions. I think it would be more beneficial for them if they knew something about it before the expert came in, because some of them are brand new and have never even seen the documents at all.
Absolutely. And certainly, one of the things I think that will be important as part of the process is any questions or concerns you may have to furnish that to staff. And if we cannot address that the land use attorney will be able to opine on that. So it's a productive discussion and you're getting the information then and there, as opposed to us having to follow up and get back to you at a subsequent meeting.
Good idea. Will the public be able to come to that meeting too?
I'm sure.
Or
it would-
workshop?
Yeah, to the workshop? Usually we have the workshop in a less formal setting. You wouldn't be voting on anything. We can do it here. Other workshops we've had just in meeting rooms where everybody can sit around a table and, kind of converse.
I think that's more beneficial as a workshop. It's more informal. You're able to ask questions better, and
Sure.
if you have maps.
You'll have to come back anyway to another meeting after that. So, but as I said, and when the commission hears the presentation, I believe that would likely be in a public hearing setting as well.
Right. But we can have questions and address them. That's before we'll have a, right.
Absolutely.
We would be advertising the workshop because all of you would be together, so the public will know about it. And
If they choose.
right.
And I think, for me personally, if we can just have you guys do it and save the money from bringing in an attorney expert, probably could answer our questions just fine. Now, if we sit in with the commissioners and we're just learning off of what's going to happen anyhow, I would be more apt for that.
Mr. Chair, if I may, the intent behind us looking to bring in that third-party independent land use attorney is that there is so much information and concern and in some cases misinformation concerning the town center development and the agreements and what it calls for, that we as staff wanted to go that extra step to have a different perspective, to look at all the documents, to ensure that the city's interests and the developer's interests, where those sit, and then to be able to provide a unbiased look at the documents. And so it was really just kind of another step so we can dispel some of the information out there and then provide additional information. So it was something that was predicated on all the things that we were hearing as staff and really inform and educate the public, this board and the Board of Commissioners.
Correct. I agree with that 100%. I just mean, I don't think you need to bring them in separate for us and for like this workshop, and then have them spending, twice as much as if they're going to do the same thing with the commissioners, and we were allowed to sit in on that.
Well, I think with them coming to this board, I believe that there's going to be other conversations that are going to happen at this board that may not happen at the Board of Commissioners, and different perspectives and ideologies that I think will assist the board in getting your perspective as well as hearing the board's perspective. So I think that there is some value to have that person come here and provide that information. And you serving in this capacity, certainly folks are going to ask you questions about it. So making sure that you're prepared and equipped to answer those questions of the community, I think it would just be a good opportunity to have that happen.
It is a good point, though, Mr. Chairman, on saving money for our city any way we can. It's a good businessman. Man, did you say this? Did you say this has to go to another public hearing?
No, it does not.
Oh, I thought I heard you say a public hearing in what you were talking about.
No, this does.
Okay.
At this time, it does not. There'll probably be a public meeting, so that when the commissioner's hearing presentation, that would probably a public meeting and would be available to the public. That was, yeah. No hearings.
So you're saying it's already planned to bring in a land use attorney?
Yes, we've already had the discussions internally as staff, and it was discussed at minimum to have them have the conversations with the Board of Commissioners, and then we talked about the possibility of engaging this board in similar dialogue, but we wanted to get your perspective this evening before we then went ahead and solicited that input, because I'm assuming that your questions are going to be similar, but your concerns are probably in line, and we thought that let's have the discussion with the board this evening, find out collectively where you are, and the attorney is going to prepare to look at all of the documents and provide you a good insight and feedback perspective, and then address your questions and comments. So we are already going to get the land use attorney involved if this board decided that you did not want to hear from that individual anyway.
Thank you.
So if you would like, we can try to schedule the workshop. We can go over everything so that you're more familiar with it by the time the attorney comes. And then when they are scheduled, we'll make a point of either having them at your regular meeting or setting a separate meeting again to discuss.
So would we like to have a meeting April 2nd, the Monday, the week before?
I'm going to be in Las Vegas.
Maybe we could have the meeting in Las Vegas? She's flying.
You do the 23rd?
April 23rd?
April 23rd.
March 23rd.
March
March
23rd.
23rd
I
is
was
on a
thinking
Friday.
April 23rd.
April 23rd.
April 23rd.
Does it have to be a Monday?
No. It can't be a Tuesday because commission meets on Tuesdays, and we never know when that will happen.
There's the 16th. March 26th.
March 26th.
That's
is
fine for
with
me.
What day of the week is that?
It's a Monday.
It's on a Monday.
Oh,
I can't come that day. I'll be out of town.
I mean, is it possible to do it I don't know how everybody's, to come here at 5 on April 9th, since we're going to be here that day anyhow, and just do it an hour before our meeting? Is that possible?
I don't think an hour is going to be near enough
Okay.
time for
All
what
right.
we need to do. I mean, there's a lot of things to go through.
Okay.
For that meeting in April, is there any items that are pressing that has to come before that board, or can that whole
There-
meeting be dedicated to?
We were hoping to do the sign codes.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not sure we'll have gotten through all the hearings and prep for that.
Right.
We don't want to put that off much longer, but
Yeah.
we could, anything else would be really small. It would be small code changes of the type we
Yeah.
did tonight, so it wouldn't take too long.
Yeah, so we can just make the meeting light. We can start at 5, but make the items light and then have the more substantive discussion after we get the easy items out of the way.
Sure, you could dismiss the regular meeting and go into workshop.
Yeah.
Anybody else? That works for me. We're already planning to be
So we'll
here.
have plenty of time, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
April 9th.
April 9th. And we'll have the regular meeting then at 5 and get that out of the way.
So move the regular meeting up to 5 from 6, and then have this workshop after.
Yeah.
6 p.m.
Immediately following, yep.
And we could get done real quick. If we just get done, then we get out sooner. Very good.
I don't think this is going to be quick.
Well, no, I mean, the meeting.
The other meeting.
Scheduled meeting, get that
Regular
done
meeting.
quickly.
I got it.
And then we can stay there for a while. And when are you going to Vegas again?
No.
No, very good. So, all right, that sounds like a plan. So you got all that, Gwen?
Yes,
You got
I do.
that jotted down?
I do.
Is there any other discussion for the planning commission?
Linda, I asked in January about cell phone towers. You got any information on that? Has anybody been coming? I just asked you that because the other municipalities were doing that, and it's in the minutes from January.
I apologize that we've had a whole lot going on. I can bring you cell tower information. I've been very involved with that over the years, so I'll get into it some more. I'll bring you, I'll look at the ordinance. I've actually testified in Congress about that, so I have some data. I'll bring you things.
Anybody else? Any old business? I guess none. And we already discussed next meeting, April 9th at 5 p.m., immediately following by a workshop. And this meeting would be adjourned.
6:57.